Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Ryan. Today I'm pretty pumped because I get to try another selection from River Roots. If you're not familiar with River Roots, they came onto my radar early this year when a buddy of mine, Matt, sent me in a sample from his bottle, and it was something crazy. It was crazy. It was like I think it was like a 15-year-old bourbon finished for 6 years in a port cask. So it was like over 20-year-old whiskey at that point from Kentucky bourbon. It was insane. It was one of the best bottles I tasted this year. Anyway, so I've been really interested in having more from them. And so another friend of mine, DMC, just sent in another sample from a River Roots bottle. This is a 10-year double oaked. It's 130.26 proof, so it's pretty hot. But here's what's cool about them. If you're not familiar with River Roots, what they're doing is it's very different. They're a non-distilling producer, but it's very different than what you're getting from a lot of other NDPs that are just buying up bottles from, or barrels from MGP and blending a couple of them together to make a select release of some kind. Very different. What they're doing is actually, they're like going to Kentucky and tasting barrels from legacy distillers and then doing really interesting things with barrels from those legacy distillers. For example, this one right here, this is a 10-year-old bourbon from Heaven Hill. 10-year-old Heaven Hill bourbon. Then they take that Heaven Hill 10-year-old bourbon and they finish it in a recharred Four Roses barrel, right? It's really interesting stuff like that. So this is a double oaked Heaven Hill bourbon, right? And a lot of us really like Heaven Hill's profile. And one of the things they are distinctly lacking is a high proof double oaked product other than a very select selection of Parker's Heritage bottles, right? So this is really cool. I'm really excited to try this. Thanks again, DMC, for sending this in. I'm going to pour this. We'll dive into it, see how it tastes. Now, while that's opening up a little bit about River Roots, they are centered out of Cleveland, Ohio, and it's just a bunch of buds who are big whiskey enthusiasts and are very picky about the barrels that they're buying and then blending or rebarreling or whatever it is they're doing with them. And I really like their logo because it's like a whiskey barrel because they're buying barrels. And then the bottom half of the logo is actually the head of a bottle itself, but it's two R's like back to back, So it's River Roots. I think it's pretty creative. I like it. Either way, I'm very excited to dive into this. Very first thing, it's just not surprising to me at all based on the other bottles that I've had from River Roots so far. Look how dark this is. It's absolutely gorgeous. That is a beautiful color to see in your glass. I'm a big fan of that already. This is probably going to be a very different profile than the last bottle I had from them. Like I said, that port finish, several years in a port barrel. This being double oaked in a recharred Four Roses barrel has me very intrigued. A lot of what I get on the nose reminds me of like Woodford Reserve's double oaked bourbon. I get this really lovely brown sugar note. And I've used this note before. It smells like brown sugar that you took and you like rubbed it into the striations of a plank of oak. You know what I'm saying? So you get those oak sugars, those vanillas, and that sweet brown sugar kind of rubbed into the oak. And I love that. But it's bringing with it notes I definitely don't get from Woodford Reserve. And I'm getting some tobacco leaf in here. And this wonderful anise note, which I love. I love a good anise note on a bourbon. Kind of brings those black tea vibes with it. I get a lot of like sawdust, like wood shop, like you walked into a wood shop. I worked for several years when I was finishing up my bachelor's degree, and then I stayed at the same university. They had a master's program that I attended. And while I was there, in order to pay my bills, I joined their maintenance crew. And so I was constantly in and out of the HVAC shop, the plumbing shop, and then also the carpenter's shop. And this smells to me like when I'd walk into the carpenter's shop and I'd need to have something specially made for a project I was working on. I think of leather grip wrapped iron tools, that sawdust in the air. It's like manliness incarnate right here. All right, well, I'm done smelling it because I want to taste it. Cheers. Come on. I should note, by the way, that most of their bottles that are like this, where it's, cask strength and has some good age on it, most of them are around the $105 mark. The 20 plus year port one was much more expensive, if I recall. It's closer to $200. This was probably somewhere between $105 and $150 would be my guess. Which, honestly, for the age you're getting from an NDP, that's actually not too bad. But man, this sip, the very first thing I get hit with is a little bit of this like Twizzlers licorice note, like red licorice. Kind of that old-timey candy kind of a vibe. I think like a vanilla saltwater taffy somewhat too. And there's this big wave of oak that comes on the tail end of that palate and carries you into the finish. I've told this before, I tried cigars because everyone's like, you know, cigars and whiskey go great together. There's a lot of guys in our community who love cigars and whiskey as a combo. I tried cigars and realized I came to the conclusion that they weren't for me. That being said, I do appreciate the smell of a sweet cigar, that sweet tobacco leaf, when I'm in the company of people who are enjoying. This reminds me on the palate of the smell of that sweet tobacco leaf. And there's even kind of like a chai tea note in here. I like this a lot. The influence of that re-charred second barrel, very prevalent. Those burnt bruleed oak sugars, very prominent here. I gotta say, DMC, I think that's an exceptional bottle. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. If I were to give that a score per my scale, I think that would rank pretty high for me. I think altogether I would land in the upper 8s for this. The only thing I think it would elevate this even more would be if the brown sugar was a little bit more prominent and we got more of that sweetness to shine through the charred oak. This is a ton of charred oak, which I am a fan of. The leather, the sweet tobacco. But I'm left kind of wanting a little bit more of the vanillas and caramels that you get off of a good, or stewed corn even, that you get off of a good bourbon. That being said, that's being pretty nitpicky because this is quite delicious. So I think I'm going to give this an 8.7 per my scale. 8.7, which is very good. Very, very good. If you ever get a chance to check out River Root's website and see if any of those bottles that they're selling at the time, because it is a bit of a revolving door, depending on availability, but if any of them sound good to you, I recommend it. I haven't had anything bad from them yet. I mean, how do you go wrong with Heaven Hill bourbon finished in 4 Roses barrels? You know what I'm saying? Like, seems like a recipe for greatness to me. With that, thanks so much for tuning into the video. I appreciate each and every one of you. Check out River Roots. I'll leave a link in the description to their website. You can peruse their wares for yourself. Hey, if you're ever interested in joining a wonderful whiskey community of people like DMC and others who send in samples, they swap bottles, do all kinds of things to help each other out, check out our Discord community, and feel free to check out the Patreon group as well. We have our own Patreon lounge, and we do events together, bottle tastings, bottle swaps, things like that. So check that out too. Cheers, my friends. May you live richly and get better with age, and I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.